Well, good afternoon. How's everyone's Ignite going? Good, good. Let me start by saying thank you for coming to our session. Now it's late in the afternoon, probably last session of the day for most of you. So I'm hoping you're all extremely keen and awake for what we're going to go through today. My name is Daniel Savage. I'm a PM in the Azure Stack team. Me and my team are responsible for the operating Azure Stack scenarios, which includes monitoring, servicing, deployment, how you do hardware replacement, the task automation we have in the system, security, and lastly, the administration user experience. Delighted to be joined by my colleague.
Hi, I'm Charlie Satterfield, also a program manager. I'm on Daniel's team. I'm responsible for the infrastructure monitoring solution within Azure Stack.
Thanks, Charlie. So Charlie's going to be harnessing the demo gods today, and he's going to show you some of the key scenarios we're going to walk through today. You've got 5 demos, right? 5. 5 demos, so we'll try and keep it interesting. Before I start, I'm sure if you've been to an Azure Stack session, you've seen this slide. The Azure Stack engineering team is extremely customer-focused, and we're always looking to talk to customers who have new scenarios or feedback they want to share with us. If you want to be part of our research group, feel free to grab the link, sign up. It's a quick three-question form, and we'd love to speak to you. So what are we going to talk about today? First of all, the importance of operating Azure Stack is understanding the roles that are required. So we're going to break down what the new Azure Stack operator role is and its importance to Azure Stack. This is a new role we've been defining that's actually specific to Azure Stack. And it's important that we all understand what it is and what's different in that role to what you may have been doing before. The second objective is to outline how Azure Stack operators should focus not only on infrastructure management, but on service and SLA management as well. As I'm sure you've learned from other Azure Stack sessions today, Azure Stack is an extension of Azure, and it's extremely important to the applications and to the developer. When we talk about operating Azure Stack, we want to take the same lens. We want you as the Azure Stack operator to understand that importance of service delivery and that combination with what you do on the infrastructure management side. In the context of infrastructure management, this is me and my team is where we've been investing to try and simplify this as much as possible. In fact, I'd go far as to say that as some of the infrastructure management things you see, we're trying to make them so you're doing them as less frequently as possible. Now, that's certainly an aspirational statement, and the scenarios will evolve over time as we work towards that goal. Lastly, if you at least take away one thing, Azure Stack is different. We do want to educate you on those differences. We want to understand how we're delivering it as an integrated system, therefore as an appliance, and we want to show you that path forward to becoming the Azure Stack operator and how some of those traditional silos of infrastructure management do not necessarily apply. Now, I'm happy to take questions as we go from the mics as long as we're keeping on time, so please do that. Okay. So, in the spirit of consistency, I'm sure if you've been to an Azure Stack slide, you've seen this slide consistently in every Azure Stack session you've been to. But what's important in the context of here and setting the scene is Azure Stack is born of Azure. So what you see in Azure, when developers are building applications, they're using the portal, PowerShell, and DevOps tools. That sits on top of the Azure Resource Manager, which is our instantiation of the cloud model. In Azure Stack, that's the same code. We have the same portal, the same PowerShell, the same DevOps and tools that sit upon the code that we bring from Azure in our Azure Resource Manager. Below that, we have the IaaS and the PaaS services. So in Azure, we have IaaS capabilities and numerous PaaS services that enable developers to build applications. In Azure Stack, we have the same IaaS capabilities and a selection of the PaaS services that we brought down. As you're probably aware, Azure sits across a large footprint of infrastructure. You'll hear numbers like 800 servers in a cluster just to support a single server. Now, obviously, we can't bring 800 servers to you. We've shrunk that down into a consumable component of 4 to 12 servers, which sits on top of our cloud-inspired infrastructure. And these all sit upon sealed hosts. What do we mean by sealed hosts? So in Azure, you do not get access to the hosts that run this infrastructure. It is very similar in the context of Azure Stack. We seal the system and provide you APIs and endpoints to manage the system. So in the context of this slide on the Azure Stack side, we're really going to be focusing on the bottom left-hand part from the Azure IaaS down. So how are you going to be managing the IaaS services? How do you do to keep your infrastructure up and running? And what things that may need to happen when you need to access the bottom parts of the system. So as I said, to get started, it's really important we understand the cloud roles and what we're doing to enable you to move towards those cloud roles. In Azure, Azure administrators, people building applications, use the Azure cloud. Obviously, in the back end, we have hundreds of Microsoft engineers that are working to keep that Azure cloud up and running. The biggest difference in the context of Azure Stack, yes, your developers, the people running DevOps using the portal and the tools, are still accessing the same endpoints and portals and tools that they do in Azure, but the biggest difference is that hardware is sitting in your data center and you have to operate it. You have to maintain the services that your developers are using. There's a few other roles called out here. The Azure Solution Architect. Think of that as the person who's defining your cloud strategy, probably many of you in this room, okay, working out how you're going to be utilizing Azure and how Azure Stack plays into what you're doing. And then the other one called out here is obviously DevOps. We see a large shift towards infrastructure as code, both in the context of Azure, and we want to make sure that's enabled in the context of Azure Stack. So break this down a little bit more. The Azure Stack operator, specifically responsible for operating Azure Stack. That's the infrastructure end-to-end, working with the solution architect on the planning, the deployment, and integration, and then packaging and offering cloud resources so that they can make them available to the people building applications. Azure Stack is only useful when the applications are being built against it. The Azure Solution Architect, he oversees the cloud computing strategy, Azure and Azure Stack. Okay, what is the cloud adoption plans? What are they doing to modernize their applications to take advantage of things like ARM? And then how does Azure Stack fit in the data center? What is your strategy for integrating it in? And what is the monitoring and management scenarios? The Azure administrator. So if you're using, who's using Azure right now? Okay. So you're going in, you're provisioning resources for people to use it. That's the Azure administrator. That still applies in Azure Stack. You're still going to be doing the same thing. That's the common role across Azure and Azure Stack. And not so much as a role, but as a kind of the practice. We're looking to how we can enable more DevOps practices so we can operationalize the development of those line of business applications, including making sure that infrastructure can be delivered as code in the context of Azure Stack. To enable that, we do have Azure Stack operator training that we announced actually yesterday, I believe. So we have training courses available, and we will have a certification exam, which will be available in the first quarter of next year. So how'd you find out about this? So getting started with your cloud operator, these learning resources are available to you, and I've got some links so you can obviously download when you get the presentation. It starts with our documentation. Our documentation was actually updated yesterday. If you go to our documentation site, you're going to see two personas. You're going to see a user persona. Think of that as the persona that logs into Azure and Azure Stack, configures resources, consumes subscriptions, and then an operator set of documentation. That's a specific documentation available for the Azure Stack operator. The learning path, so we've got some videos now lining up, some trainings there, and you will see some official courses coming. So I encourage you to kind of embrace these, look at the resources, and then look for that certification exam that's coming in the January of next year. All right. So moving on. So let's get into kind of what are the key things you're going to be doing to operate Azure Stack. So once you've kind of learned about being an operator, you've got your Azure Stack system, it's been deployed, it's been integrated. There's a session on integrating Azure Stack, so I'm not going to cover that part of that today. But the first thing you're really going to be doing when you get Azure Stack up and running, kind of a day 2 type thing, is you're going to be managing that IaaS services and getting user access set up. So you're really getting the system ready so you can actually start doing your proof of concepts with your developers. So what are you doing in the context of that? So in the context of compute, and I'm going to walk through the 3 main aspects of IaaS and the things you're going to do, and then Charlie's going to come up and show us in the portal how these things happen. From a compute perspective, the things that you're going to be doing, first of all, is adding and managing content. This is about getting the resources that you need and your developers need to build applications, which includes bringing content and syndicating content down from Azure so that they can be made available for people to deploy that set of content. That's the first thing you do. The second thing will be managing capacity. So you have capacity in your Azure Stack system, and you have to react to the alerts that happen in the system. And then managing quotas. What's a quota? In Azure, when you create a subscription, when you choose a particular plan, that plan is kind of bounded by the amount of resources you can consume. In Azure Stack, we have plans and offers that you as the operator set up. Those plans and offers allowed your users to create subscriptions. But those subscriptions you can then constrain so that your operators, so that people consuming those subscriptions don't use up all the capacity in your system. That's what a quota is, and Charlie will walk you through that. So that's compute. On the storage side, the main thing you're going to be doing on the storage side is managing capacity. Again, reacting to alerts when capacity is constrained and then taking action on them. Things like reclaiming space. So you may have users who have had storage accounts and they've deleted them. You want to reclaim that back. You want to do your garbage collection and make that storage available for other people. Migrate containers, so moving them so you can kind of keep the capacity in check. And again, managing quotas on your storage, making sure people can't consume all your storage up in one go. And then lastly, on the network side of things, and I think you can see a pattern here on the network side, manage the capacity. Network has capacity too. We have public IPs that are made available so people can build applications that are accessible, but they're obviously there's a finite number that you provision to the system, so they will run out as people create VMs that consume public IP addresses. So you have the ability in the portal to add to that, and then again, manage quotas in the context of network. So then you're asking yourself, okay, so how can I limit tenant access to those Stack resources? I briefly covered this. Quotas, plans, and offers. You control the quotas, the plans, and you make them available for your customers to subscribe to. Plus, in the context if you're a service provider, you can also empower resellers to sign up their own customers to your offers as well, similar to what can be done in Azure. So with that, we're going to jump into our first demo, and Charlie's going to show us what that's all about.
Thank you, Daniel. All right, so I'm the Azure Stack operator. I've just set up my OEM has just provided the Azure Stack instance to me. I have the keys to the kingdom. I can log into the admin portal and switch over so that you can actually see the admin portal. And so this is what it looks like. This is very similar to the Azure admin side of things using the user portal. This one's the admin portal. So we're going to get started by creating an offer. In order for any of my customers to consume the services I have within this Azure Stack region, I need to create that offer so that they can create subscriptions. So I'm going to go ahead and select New, Offers Plans, and then an offer. So in this case, this is going to be Ignite offer. And I'll put this in the Ignite .org. All right, so these are the details of my offer, but the offer's meaningless if I don't have plans and quotas that actually expose and limit services that my customers can consume. So I need to create a plan. So you can see I do have some plans. I've been using this for some other demos. So let me go ahead and add a plan. Again, I'll give it a display name. So this will be my Ignite plan. All right. So now I need to select services as well as the quotas for each of those services. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and make this just an IaaS offer. You can see I've got compute, Key Vault, network, storage, subscriptions, and Microsoft Web as my services. Microsoft Web is actually the app service, PaaS service, that has been installed on this region. So I'll go ahead and select compute, Key Vault, network, and storage. Next, I'll select quotas. In order to limit the amount of resources, whether physical or virtual, that my customers can consume, I need to create quotas. We have default quotas that ship with the system, but you may have specific instances that you want to limit a line item or two. So I'm going to create a new quota for storage. It gets pre-populated with our default quota values. So maximum capacity in gigabytes. So I'm going to limit this one to just 300 gigabytes. Storage accounts, I don't really care for how many storage accounts they create. So this is going to be my Ignite storage quota. Okay. I'll select that. I'll go to network. All right, so network is actually where I have the biggest consumption issue because I've got a limited set of public IPs, and it takes a while for me to go and get additional IPs. I don't want to run out too quick. So in this case, this would be my Ignite network quota, and virtual networks are fine. Public IPs, 50. That's way too many. So I'm going to limit this plan to this plan to one public IP. I can also configure max number of load balancers, max NICs. But in my case, the only thing I care about restricting is that public IP. So I'll create that, select it. Key Vault, there's nothing you can restrict on the Key Vault side. You just have to select the unlimited quota. And then lastly, Microsoft Compute. I'm going to create a new quota. And this will be my Ignite Compute quota. And I'm going to go ahead and limit them to a max number of 5 virtual machines, and I'll give them 20 cores. All right, so let me hit OK, and select OK again. Scroll back so you can see more. All right, so I have the details on my plan. It's about to create that plan. And so there's that My Ignite plan. I need to select it. Now, add-on plans. This gives the customer the ability to go in and add additional resources if they desire. So I can create an offer that also has an add-on plan to give those customers the flexibility. In this case, I'm just going to restrict them to my base plan. So I'll hit Create. All right, deployment is in progress. There we go. It succeeded, so let me go take a look at my offers. All right, so there it is, my Ignite offer. Now, you'll notice I've got a little bit of a notification bar here that says the offer is private and users cannot see it. By default, any offer you create in the system will be private to begin with. You need to set it to public in order for your customers to be able to create their own subscriptions on those. If you have large offers that you only want to offer to select customers, you keep those offers private, and then you manually create the subscription for your customer and hand it off to them. So in this case, I'm going to change the state and make it public. All right, so now that I've made it public, it should be visible to my customers, but I need to also make sure that I've got the right content for them. So if I go ahead so let me close out of this. I'm going to go ahead into Marketplace Management. I've already created a bunch of content, downloaded it from the Azure Marketplace syndication, but I have at least one more I think that our customers need. And I will go, and in this case, I got a request for Ruby, so I'm going to go ahead and add this as an artifact in my region so that my customers can deploy it. So I'll go ahead and click download. The downloading of the product just started. Once it's complete, it will be available for my customers to provision. All right, so let me close out of that. So I've now created an offer. I've made sure I have content ready for my customers to consume from an IaaS perspective. So let's see what the experience is like for the customer now. So I'm logged in. Let me actually refresh real quick. I'm logged in as a different user into the portal. This is the user-facing portal. So I'm going to go ahead and click Get a Subscription. And this will be my Ignite Subscription 2. And I'm going to select an offer. So you can see here my offer has shown up. So I can select that and click Create. And it's telling me the subscription has been created. But I need to refresh the portal in order to consume the resources exposed to me now. So I'll go ahead and refresh. And at this point, I can go ahead and provision a VM. So I could go to Compute. In this case, I will deploy Windows Server 2016. I'll click Create. You'll notice that the experience is pretty much identical to what you see in Azure. It's thinking. It's got to configure the basic settings. So I can go through this process. All right, let me just test VM, username, test admin. I'm going to use this later. Okay. Click OK. At this point, I select the size of the VM that I need to deploy. Remember, I restricted it to the amount of cores as well as VMs, so I can only deploy 20 cores. I'm not in any danger of reaching that limit at this point. I'll select an A1 for this instance. And it's going to create a storage account for me. Public IP address. Right now it's set to none. So I can go ahead and select Ignite. I need to create new. Oh, I've reached my quota. So all right, so I'm not going to use a public IP address for this one. So I'll go ahead and click OK. I'll take all the defaults. And that'll go ahead and deploy. Now, if I ran into issues, in this case I did run into issues, I can ask the Azure Stack operator for help. Help me figure out where I went wrong, what's happening. And to give the Azure Stack admin the ability to go and troubleshoot for me, I need to add them via RBAC to my subscription or to my resource group or to the resource that I just tried to deploy. So in this case, I'll go in to the subscription. So hold on, my more services, subscriptions, and I'll go into this subscription. And within subscriptions, on the side menu, I have the access control area. And so I need to add the Azure Stack operator. So I'm going to go ahead and give them contributor permissions to begin with. So it'll search the directory. I found him. I click Save. All right, so they've now been added as a contributor to my subscription. So they can log into the user portal, and they can access and troubleshoot the resources that I just failed to deploy. So as an Azure Stack operator, this is the steps you would be asking your users or your customers to perform so that you can go and troubleshoot any issue they might have with the resources that they're working on. All right.
Thanks, Charlie. Okay.
Go ahead.
So yeah, so kind of key points here. Obviously, as an operator, that management of the capacity you have in your system, creating the plans and offers, what available, managing the quota is going to be a critical part of that. And then the second part is supporting the people building applications. And what you see there is a very consistent RBAC experience you see with Azure, and the ability to assign resources and assign users to particular resources. So, for example, in the troubleshooting scenario, if your tenant is having problems, you can RBAC them in, and then you can work together with the people building on your Azure Stack Cloud for issues they may have. So getting into infrastructure issues, this is really this is really where we get into the infrastructure management part of it and what you're going to be doing in that context. And in that, this is kind of where I need you to start thinking about managing Azure Stack not like a virtualization host. You're running a cloud. Okay? You're running a cloud in your data center providing services to your application. You need to think about it that way. Not worrying, you'll see the slide, and I actually have it in here, about not worrying too much about the internals of the system. It's more important to focus on what you're delivering to your application developers, and then kind of guiding through following the infrastructure tasks we make available to you and the workflows that we kind of educate you on. This is our internals, right? This is what the internal of the system looks like. We show this to kind of show that we have the portal and we have ARM, and it sits across a set of resource providers in our RP. And yes, we have controllers in there that kind of do all this work to manage the cloud, but they are our internals, okay? They are subject to change. We will evolve the internals of the system. As we learn from you and we kind of move Azure Stack forward, that'll change. So this picture will change, so you shouldn't focus too much on it. We will take you through and talk about the APIs and the things you should care about. Because the internals, we're delivering it to you as an integrated system, as an appliance. We're working with you on the deployment choices, but we're making the configuration choices to make sure that Azure Stack can run successfully, right? So that's why we say internals are internals. So what is the vision for operating Azure Stack, okay? We expect one or more Azure Stack operators to be able to kind of run this stack and look across all the capabilities that we provide. There's a single point of infrastructure management. Just like we have a single global API for the tenant to access resources in both Azure and Azure Stack. On the infrastructure side, we surface these capabilities up through ARM, so you have a single point of access for that. Yes, we have a few others, and Charlie will go into in the context of when you need additional support or those UX might be down. But we do and are aiming to provide all those workflows through that single API. As I said, we've controlled the configuration. We've worked with the hardware partners to determine how to deliver a cloud to you that can run successfully in the context of delivering IaaS and PaaS services on a cloud SLA. That means there's very few configuration knobs to turn in the system. Very few options for you to kind of change or tweak the system. In fact, it's really limited. You do not require to make those kind of changes to operate Azure Stack. And when we build this, we focus on kind of how do we make sure that you're not having to do this, so you can focus on serving your application developers and focus on that business SLA. So you just saw this in the context of what we provide in infrastructure management. Charlie was in that. Azure Stack, the administration portal, that's our web-based management portal. It's built on the same UX framework that you consume the Azure portal from. That's why you see the look and feel is the same. We just color it default by different so that you can kind of see that you're in the administration portal. But what are the things you do within there? Monitoring. We have inbuilt monitoring within Azure Stack, okay? We deployed the system, we configured the system. We have a monitoring system that is looking to make sure that that system that we deployed and configured is working correctly. And we spend a lot of time in that monitoring making sure that when something goes wrong, we're not just giving you noise, we're looking at actionable workflows for you to kind of remediate and work through fixing the issue. Patching and update. This is an integrated system. We build a patching and update system that updates the whole system at once from a software perspective. You don't have to go in and pick and choose and determine what needs to be updated. We provided a system that kind of takes care of that for you. Hardware's going to fail. I think we all know that in the context of running our data centers. We built workflows and so that you can consume when a disk fails or a NIC fails or a server fails, a workflow that you can follow to update your hardware to ensure that your cloud keeps running. And then from the SLA and the service management and that plans, offers, and management, that's kind of a large part of what you're going to do in the context of infrastructure management. So a little bit more on monitoring. So the monitoring system is built in. It has a set of rules that are going to look for a set of conditions. And me and, in fact, Charlie predominantly and the team have been working with every component that you saw on that internals drive to really understand what their failure and their fault modes are, okay? So not just saying, okay, generate this event so then someone can go look through some log later and try and figure what's going on. The conversation with the component teams who work in Azure Stack is, okay, when this fails, how do we fix it? And if we can fix it, we should remediate it automatically. If not, we give the user a set of instructions to walk through. The health state of these components is tied to the existence of those alerts. We're not a monitoring system. We're not a data center monitoring tool for monitoring your infrastructure. We don't have complex health models. We have alerts. They tell you something's wrong. They tell you the criticality of what's wrong and then how to fix it. We have separate health of cloud services from the cloud infrastructure. So we have this layer cake of, okay, we have the infrastructure in there, and we separate the health state between the infrastructure and the services that you're providing to your users. So the health monitoring system within Azure Stack is predominantly looking at the software components used to run the Azure Stack cloud. And then we are built on Windows Server 2016 technologies. There is a subsystem within there that allows us to surface some hardware-related events, for example, when disk fails up into the monitoring system. But we do rely on external monitoring systems for a few other things. First of all, the network switches that appear that are in the integrated system, they don't just appear, they're there, need to be monitored by an external system. We do not have an inbuilt monitoring for that. So you would stand up an external monitoring system, whether using something like System Center or Nagios, and via SMNP, you can monitor those systems. The hardware itself, so the hardware vendors provide a hardware lifecycle host in the system, which is predominantly used and using their tools to monitor the hardware devices that exist within the system. So we know that there's parts of the system that need to be monitored externally. And so to ensure that we can actually keep the information in the same place so that you as running your data center can do things like correlation and the tools that you've been using, we have that RESTful API so you can pull alerts that we come from our software components out into those external monitoring systems as well. That's the first major investment. The second one is the patching and update system. So what we do, we have an orchestrated engine within there that knows the configuration of the system and knows the order in which software components need to be updated. We will curate and pre-validate the updates on the software and then working with our hardware partners for firmware updates to deliver a single package to you. Okay, that package is something you'll consume through the UX for updating your system. We're aiming to have a rapid cadence of delivery. In order to keep the cloud consistency promise with Azure, we have to be able to update Azure Stack frequently. Azure Stack updates daily all the time. If you're using Azure, you know that new services are coming online, new features are there, APIs are evolving. So we need to be able to keep Azure Stack on the same train to maintain consistency. We're looking at being able to deliver monthly updates to you so you can update your system. With the thinking that you cannot be more than 3 months out of date, otherwise you're out of support. So if you haven't taken an update for 3 months and you get an issue with your system that involves calling support, either hardware, either Microsoft or your hardware vendor, the first thing they're going to tell you is to get up to the latest version. So with that, Charlie's going to show you this.
Thank you, Daniel. All right, so let's jump back over. There you are. All right, so you already were sort of introduced to the admin experience. We've developed region management as sort of the cornerstone of the admin experience within Azure Stack. We've pinned some of the elements that exist within region management to the default dashboard, such as updates, alerts, as well as the list of resource providers. So if I were to go ahead and jump into region management, you'll see those tiles, plus an additional tile of infrastructure roles. The alerts tile allows me to jump in and see a list view of the alerts, and then drill into each of the alerts to see the issue as well as the remediation steps involved. So if I drill in, I can see that I've got 2 alerts. Both are warnings. They don't require immediate action from me, but I should be familiar with it. So I can see I've got public IP address utilization at 70% across all of my pools. I believe I mentioned I'm somewhat constrained on my public IPs. You saw that I failed to deploy a VM because I had reached a quota. So in order to relieve this issue, the alert is telling me that it's at least 70%, and I need to add another block of IPs. All right? And so in order to do that, I need to go to the capacity management blade and click Add IP Pool. So to get to the capacity IP blade, I can navigate back to the dashboard and follow a breadcrumb that way, or we provide context links in each of the alerts so that I can jump directly to the page and take the action specified. So in this case, I've jumped right to the capacity blade, and I can select Add IP Pool. This opens up an Add IP Pool blade. I can enter the name, the address range, and then click OK, and this will add to my existing block of IPs and relieve that IP pool pressure. Now that I've jumped to the capacity blade, this is part of region management. You can get to it through region management. I see an alerts view. I have 2 alerts that are both associated with the capacity of my region. I can see my scale units. This is the S cluster. I've got a single scale unit within this region. And then I can see some of the capacity metrics. I can see the percent of physical storage used, the percent of physical memory used, as well as, again, the percent of IP pools used. And I'm at 87% used. I'm quickly going to be running out of those public IPs. Now, before I jump to the scale units, let me go back to the dashboard. So within region management, I already explored alerts. We also have updates. Within updates, and Daniel mentioned, we curate and test those update packages. This is where I'll see the updates that are waiting for me to apply. Now, this didn't automatically populate. I had to take some action in order for this to be exposed within the portal. I'm notified monthly by Microsoft as well as the OEM that I purchased through of updates that are available. At the moment, I physically download that update and import it into a local storage account within Azure Stack. Once it's available in that local storage account, it appears in this list so that I can now update Azure Stack. Once I select it, I have the ability to select Update Now any moment. It's thinking. When I hit Update Now, it runs through application of all the software update packages contained within that package, rebooting all our infrastructure role instances as well as our scale unit nodes to complete the process. We migrate workloads from one node to the other as we perform those recycles. However, there is some risk of intermittent downtime when those cycles happen, so we recommend that you schedule a maintenance window when you want to apply a patch. All right. So the other 2 tiles within region management are the resource providers tile. This exposes the list of foundational resource providers within Azure Stack, as well as the ability to link into each of their admin experiences. So you already saw capacity. We also have compute, key vault, network, and storage. If I drill into compute, I can see an alert window, which doesn't have data at the moment. And then I can see content. And this is where I can see all the VM images that have been downloaded from the marketplace. This is the specific image. But this is also where I would go if I wanted to add custom VM images. If I have a need from my customers to provide a custom image, this is where I go to add them. So I go ahead and click Add. I provide a publisher name, an offer, so this is going to be a server offer, or actually this Ignite offer. I specify the OS type, whether it's Windows or Linux. Provide a SKU, this will be a server SKU, and then a version of this custom VM image so that I can keep track of versioning. I then need to provide the URL to the blob storage account that contains the image. I already had to upload it into blob storage. Once it's there, I can then point this UI to it, click Create, and it will import that into our VM image repository. Once it's in the repository, it's available for your customers to consume via template deployments, but it's not available yet in the marketplace. There's PowerShell as well as some community tools that allow you to easily add those images or a marketplace record for those images, but I'm not going to demo that during this session. All right, so we've explored compute. Let's go into network. So again, you can see a familiar pattern here. We're always listing alerts, alert content at the top of each blade for our RPs, as well as infrastructure roles. Again, I can see my public IP pool usage. Now I can see some of the user resources that have been deployed for this resource provider. So I can see all the tenant virtual networks that have been created and the subscriptions they belong to. Now, I really can't take any action on these, but it's a record of what my user base has been installing. Likewise, on load balancers, I can see the subscriptions as well as the public IP they're consuming. All right. Lastly, for storage, in storage, I can see my user storage capacity. The metric that was displayed to you on the capacity blade was your total physical storage capacity. This is the user storage capacity exposed via our blob table queue service. And if I drill into it, I can see a trend on the capacity for the past day. I can change that range. And then I can also see the individual file shares that are used for tenant data and their specific consumption. Go back. So within this, I can also, much like in the network resource provider, I can access a list of the storage accounts that my tenants have provisioned within my Azure Stack region. If I were to experience a resource constraint on storage and needed to free up space, I could use the reclaim space action that's on this storage accounts blade to go ahead and immediately garbage collect any deleted storage accounts that were hanging around. All right. Lastly, storage has 3 services it offers, which is the blob, table, and queue service. If I drill into each, they give me visual on the latency over the past day, availability over the past day, as well as total requests over the past day for each of those services. All right. So from capacity, we have the ability to go look at a few other items. Scale units, which is the single scale unit that this region is deployed on. And then I can drill in and see the list of nodes that make up the scale unit that we've deployed to. In this case, I've got 7 nodes. I'm missing one. I took one out of rotation because I needed to get that replaced by my OEM. All right. Lastly, as far as admin experience, we'll get back to that in a moment. That makes up most of the admin experience. Okay. We'll demo at this point.
Come back later.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Charlie. So Charlie was showing you most of the infrastructure management scenarios you're going to be doing. To give you a bit of context, these all sit on specific resource providers that are made available for Azure Stack. We have three main ones: our Fabric, an FRP, Fabric Resource Provider, HRP, Health Resource Provider, and a URP, Update Resource Provider. So the tasks that, I've not moved the deck.
Oh, sorry.
That would help. So the tasks that Charlie was walking through, like managing and dealing with alerts, are going to be coming and exposed through the Health RP. The updates is also exposed through the Update RP. And most of the other things Charlie talked about, like the scale units, managing the capacity, that's from the Fabric RP. I tell you that because those RPs are available in ARM for you to consume again. So if you're looking to build automation against APIs, and we'll show you a little bit of that later, and through some stuff through PowerShell, those are available, right? They're running on a set of microservices and the infrastructure ring, again, not important, just know that they're highly available resource provided. They're only available in their default admin subscription, so because it's an R-backed system, if you're not a member of that default provider subscription, when you log into that admin portal, you're going to get a blank dashboard. Each RP provides that northbound API, and the southbound API talks to the controllers. So with that, now there are some other RPs in the system. Did you cover this already?
Yes, that one already got covered.
Okay. So we're going to move on. Charlie covered this in the previous demo by looking through all the context of the UX that is available. So there's one other thing that I'm sure you're all interested in, and that is what do you do around backup, business continuity, and disaster recovery. And in this, and like most of the things that we're going to talk to you about in Azure Stack this week, you really have to think about that separation between the user space and the infrastructure space. And the thinking really starts when you think about what you do in Azure. When you deploy VMs in Azure, when you build applications against Azure, you're responsible for making sure those applications, those resources are backed up. You're responsible for how you build applications that are resilient when you build those applications in Azure. Yes, Azure provides you an SLA, but you know that when you're building an application and you're building to modern architectures, that you're going to build your resiliency at the application layer. That's how you need to think about it in Azure Stack as well. Because in Azure, the infrastructure you don't do anything with. Azure looks after operating that infrastructure and the business continuity of that. Let me go back, sorry. So in Azure Stack, in the context of BCDR, you've got to think about that user and infrastructure separation. So the user separation at the top there is, how can you ensure you protect the applications deployed on IaaS? Right? What am I doing to back up my VMs, and what are the tools that I'm using? What is my data protection strategy if I'm consuming PaaS services? And then on the infrastructure side, and this is where we will be making investments for you as Azure Stack operators to successfully do this, is like, how can you recover that Azure Stack infrastructure when it fails? Is there user-associated data that I need to back up in my PaaS services? So to kind of graphically put this in place, you see that separation. So you have that user space where your customers are creating VMs, creating resources. So if they're creating VMs in there, they can use things like Azure Backup or Azure Site Recovery to make sure that those VMs have BCDR plans around them. We'll also be working with various partners that have solutions in the market that provide similar service in Azure so that they can run those services in Azure Stack. Veeam is an example. And then the PaaS services, okay, if you have data in PaaS services, how do you get that out and back it up to an external target? This is all things that you're going to need to think about in the user space. Now for the infrastructure, what we've done in the context of the infrastructure is we've built a backup resource provider that is going to take the state data around the infrastructure and put it to an external file share. Now that's for the enablement of the cloud recovery scenario. So if you get an instance where your Azure Stack has a catastrophic failure and you've lost your cloud, you're going to have to recover. This is what we made available, and what are the steps that you're going to need to walk through to do that. So you configured your backup, okay? Your hardware fails. What needs to happen is you're going to work with your partner to get an Azure Stack, whether the one that failed or a new one, up and running. And then working with them, you're going to take that backup that you had and restore it in to bring the cloud back together. Get those services back up and running. Then you can get your customers to bring their applications back because they'd have backed them up, or they would have had resiliency that they weren't affected by it. So those are the phases you walk through in the context of cloud recovery. I will encourage you, I know Hector had a BCDR session going on right now where he talks about this in longer form. Please look up Hector's session on recovering Azure Stack from a catastrophic data loss. He'll go in more details for that. But what we thought we'd quickly show you is just how the configuration of this. This may be the quickest demo we have ever.
All right, so when you get your Azure Stack deployed from your OEM, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to want to go ahead and set up your backups. So from more services, I'm going to browse down to infrastructure backup, and you can see my backup is currently not enabled. There's a nice blue button here. I can go ahead and configure the backup. To configure the backup, I need to provide it with a UNC path to a share that this Azure Stack management network can reach. I need to provide it with a username and password that has credentials to access the share. And then lastly, I need to provide an encryption key. This encryption key is very important. It's the OEM will run a script at the end of deployment to generate this encryption key. And you need to hang on to this encryption key, one, to put into this to configure your backup, but two, in order to restore any of those backups, you need to use the same encryption key. So it's very important to hang on to that. Once I go ahead and enter the encryption key and select OK, my backup target is now configured. I'm going to click out of this. In order to initiate a backup, I have to do this manually at GA. I execute either directly against the API exposed for the backup RP or via PowerShell, and I can set up PowerShell to run on a schedule and go ahead and kick off that backup. It backs up the metadata, which is about 10 gigs, I believe. So keep that in mind as you provision a share specifically for this use. We will add alerting so that if you're running out of space or you have a backup failure, it'll notify you so that you can go ahead and take action. Again, you would come in, if you need to change the backup location, you'd come right back to this UX, enter the same details, and again, use that same encryption key. All right.
Thanks, Charlie. You put me back. So yeah, because we know what to back up. There's a very simple configuration for to be able to do that. But like we talked about, this is something that exists in your data center. You're responsible for when we put that backup out on that share to manage the life cycle of the files that are created, keeping those encryption keys. So if a restore is required, you're going to bring that back in. But we take care of understanding what needs to be backed up and putting it into that 10 gig file. So Charlie's prepping to kind of do some, he's probably already prepped, some final demos that kind of wrap around the automation, integration with Ops Manager. But before we get to that, I think there's two operational considerations that I think you all want to be aware of. And just to kind of summarize from a security perspective, we talk about Azure Stack being an integrated system having sealed hosts. So the security principles of Azure Stack, the first thing is we've taken an assume breach perspective, saying that like it's not if someone gets in and is doing malicious things, it's when. So how do we make sure we can constrain what they do when that happens? So we're using least privilege RBAC and just enough administration so that the things that can be done on the system are constrained. We have auditing to make sure that you know what is going on. And it's hardened by default. The storage has data at rest encryption, which means that all the data is there, is secured. We have a secure OS baseline. We looked at the standards that are required, and we apply a baseline that makes sure that the system is hardened by default. We remove legacy protocols that are not required. We don't require them for running the system, so they're turned off. And we have customized AV configurations that we've determined are the best way to make sure this system is secure. From a compliance perspective, one of the key use cases we've talked about in the context of Azure Stack is the ability to meet any, develop applications that meet any regulatory requirements, which obviously meets compliance things. So we've done formal assessments, and we'll do more formal assessments by third parties. And then we'll pre-compile documentation for the technology controls that you can then use. We're starting with the two that you see on the page here. Now, we're obviously not certifying Azure Stack. That is your job. The certification to meet one of these standards involves people, process, and technology. So you have to certify your people, you have to certify your processes, but what we will give you is information that helps you very quickly understand what Azure Stack has done in the technology controls perspective. And then we'll do this demo.
All right. Thank you, Daniel. All right. How many out there are using SCOM? Fair number. All right. Well, we've developed a management pack specifically to monitor Azure Stack so that you can plug your monitoring directly into your existing SCOM instance and have your alerts flow into your ticket system and keep using the same processes for notification and working tickets that you do today. Like Daniel mentioned before, when Azure Stack is not meant to be a data center management solution. We're meant to plug into your existing data center solutions, and this is one of the ways. We also have a connector for Nagios that's been published as well. But really, any solution that can be pointed to a REST API to consume a REST API is a candidate for integrating as far as a data center monitoring solution. So within SCOM, we have a Microsoft Azure Stack folder and a health dashboard, which I find one of the more useful views within this management pack. It shows me the deployments that I've registered with this Azure Stack management pack, and I'll show you in a minute how I went about doing that. The deployments are discovered in their entirety. We don't expand out all the components that are the innards or the internals of Azure Stack. We display a health state and a alert count for each deployment and region. So in this case, I've got two deployments, a Redmond deployment, which has one alert. I've got connectivity lost to a physical disk. And then the one that we've been demoing on, Orlando, has two alerts. The infrastructure role instance unavailable and the public IP address utilization at 70% or more. Now, as I work the ticket and I resolve the issue, if I go ahead and close the ticket in my system, that notifies SCOM. SCOM goes ahead and closes the alert or resolves the alert in SCOM. That goes ahead and the process keeps flowing back to Azure Stack where that alert gets closed out. All right. One of the other things within this management pack is we do have a capacity dashboard, and we're collecting the metrics that you saw in the capacity blade so that you can track them over time. Since the view in the capacity blade was a snapshot, we have, so if I go to performance view, so you have the ability to select the metrics that are important to you, as well as select the time range. And this allows you to track and do some capacity planning on your end. All right. Now, in order to configure the management pack, I need to jump into administration. And SCOM's taking a little bit. All right. Now, within administration, I have, and this is unfortunately very small, a Microsoft Azure Stack listing within administration. And in this view, I can go ahead and add or edit or remove a deployment. So if I click Add a Deployment, I have to provide it with the endpoint URL and the region name of the deployment. The endpoint URL is always going to be admin management, then your region name, then the rest of your fully qualified domain name. Your region, obviously, is your region name. And we have a Lock the taskbar. Nope. Apologize. Go. Click next. At this point, I now need to provide the credentials that SCOM will use to go ahead and authenticate against my Azure Stack deployment in order to query HRP to get the list of alerts, and also in order to query HRP to invoke a close alert on a specific alert. So in this case, I can specify an Azure Active Directory user principal or a service principal from ADFS. We support both authentication methods through this management pack. So you provide the username and password, you click Add Deployment, and the deployment is then registered within SCOM, and within moments you'll see a health state as well as any active alerts. I have both of my deployments already registered at this point, so I'm going to go ahead and close out of this. All right, so close out of that as well. All right. So that's monitoring via SCOM. Sort of integrates you into the data center, allows you to use your existing processes. But what about making your life easier? What about automating some of the tasks that you've seen through the UX? Well, we're exposing all of those tasks via PowerShell. You can access it via all the APIs. We're also building PowerShell that you can use right out of the box. So let me... All right. So we were just looking at a list of alerts. The list of alerts we were looking at in the UX was filtered on only active alerts. So I'm going to go ahead and run this PowerShell command. And this should actually get me the list of active alerts as well as alerts that have been closed over the past few days. So let me scroll up. So I've returned it in a format of a table, and I've specified a few of the columns that should be listed. So I have the title of the alert there. I can see that I still have 2 active, that infrastructure role instance unavailable, as well as that capacity alert for IP pools. If I wanted to take some automated action against this, first I need to look at those that are only active. So I'll go ahead and filter this on active alerts. All right, now we're down just to those 2. Now, I can take action on this. The recommended action for that infrastructure role instance unavailable is to actually just start that role instance, or attempt to start that role instance. To do that, I invoke the AZS infra role instance power on command, and I provide the name of that role instance as well as the location. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a try. All right, so while that's executing, we have a bunch of commands. We used to be using a Azure Stack tools available via GitHub. That's still available. We have additional APIs that are coming from PowerShell for backup, for update, as well as what you're seeing here for alerts as well as infrastructure commands. Now, I know that this command, I've set this up purposely to fail so that we can jump into what your next task is as an Azure Stack operator, which is you need to interact with support every now and again, and they're going to want logs. So as soon as this fails, all right, and so we've got a failure. So at this point, if I went back and I took a look at that alert, the next step in the alert for infrastructure role says, well, if you can't resolve it by starting that role instance, contact support. So before I contact support, it recommends that I start collecting logs. In order to collect logs, I need to log into that hardware lifecycle host that my OEM provided as part of the solution so that I can access the privilege endpoint and start log collection. So I'll go ahead and access my HLH. And in order to go ahead and, let me increase the font size for you here. Okay. In order to access my privilege endpoint, I need to add that privilege endpoint instance to WinRM as a trusted host. So I'll go ahead and add that. Next, I need to provide credentials. And the credentials for accessing my privilege endpoint are the domain of my Azure Stack region, and then cloud admin. So I'll go ahead and enter those credentials. Lastly, we need to enter into a PS session against that endpoint. All right. I'm now in a privilege endpoint, but it's pretty constrained. If I run get command, you'll see a fairly constrained list of functions, and commands available via the privilege endpoint. Now, I need to collect logs. I've made available a UNC path on my HLH machine so that the output of the logs can be stored on my HLH machine, and then I can upload that to Microsoft support. So in order to go ahead and get logs, I'm going to use the get Azure Stack logs command. I need to provide an output share path. I've already done that, the IP of my HLH and the share that I've provided. And then I need to provide an output share credential. In this case, it's just the local admin on the box. Now, by default, I haven't added any other parameters to this. So by default, I'll collect 4 hours of logs. However, if this alert had happened 8 hours ago, I would need to add a from and to time so that I collect the right period of time where the issue has occurred. Now, don't worry if you collect just the default and you don't happen to get it, our CSS or support team will be happy to help you with the instructions on how to get that specific path. But I'm going to go ahead and just collect the default because my issue just occurred. Go ahead and kick this off. It was plural. It's now singular. All right, so now I need to enter in the password for my output share credential. All right, so I've now, okay. In this case,
I guess you call support.
I call support because I'm going to change my share, but I'm also going to retry. No, same error. I guess I am calling support.
Yeah.
All right.
You better get on to that. All right. Thanks, Charlie. So just as we get back on there, the predominant way you're going to be administering and operating Azure Stack is through the portal, through PowerShell, and through those resource providers we talked about. But there are going to be situations, and that's why we've made this privilege endpoint available, where you're going to be having to do different tasks. But that privilege endpoint is a GIA-controlled endpoint. So only specific things are made available to that. It's not as if, okay, I'll get this endpoint and I get access to everything. It is very, very constrained with what you can do, as Charlie showed. So just some other operator tasks that we haven't covered today. Deploying and managing PaaS services. The reason I bring that up is something to think about. As you bring on these PaaS services, it may be something that you have operators that are kind of specialized in running these services. You're going to have an operator that's kind of running your infrastructure, making your IaaS up and running. But as you bring on things like web apps and you have developers who are building against your PaaS services, or you're bringing on the SQL and MySQL resource providers, something to think about is whether you need specialist operators to kind of operate them. And we didn't cover the fact that you need to rotate credentials and certificates, but that's something that's available as a PowerShell command that you can run. So in summary, yes, operating Azure Stack is different. We want that mindset to kind of change on how you're working with things. Yes, the tools, the terminology, the processes, they're very familiar, but what you can do against the system changes, and where the value is changes as well. Operating Azure Stack is new and involved. Engage with us. We will learn what things are working for you, what things are not, and we will evolve the scenarios for operating Azure Stack as we go, as we make it better for you. And it is an opportunity for partnership. We do expect people to go to managed service providers who run Azure Stack on their behalf, or look into SIs. So they will provide additional value in the context of running Azure Stack. A few other things, getting going with Azure Stack, develop applications in Azure, download the SDK if you haven't already, and then look to kind of get integrated systems set up and running. If you're not aware, there's 2 ways you can get hands-on with Azure Stack this week. The first of all is customer immersion. This is in the Hyatt Regency. You go sign up, and they'll walk you through various modules. Some of the things that we covered today will be there, and you can actually get hands-on and do it yourself. If you come to our booth, we have a hands-on experience. You get a token, which you can log into a web portal, and you can actually run through the modules for operating Azure Stack in the context of that. So very much recommend you go do that. I'll just call out some related content. Actually, it's pretty hard to read. The ones I would go look at would be the one by Thomas, which is here, integrating Azure Stack into your data center. It's really going to talk to you about, okay, that thing lands, what things you have to prepare for, how do you get it plugged in, how does it connect with your network, how does it connect with your monitoring system. Security and compliance is on here. Filippo, we briefly touched on that in this talk. If you want to go spend an hour with Filippo and talk about all things security. And there was one more I wanted to call out. Yeah, Hector's business continuity and disaster recovery. And that'll really round out what you're expected to do is becoming Azure Stack operators. With that, we have a couple of minutes left, and we'll take any questions from the mics if anyone has any. Okay. Have a good evening. Oh, there we go. Yes. So I didn't cover anything. Okay.
I have a question regarding the licensing. What do I get when I order the whole thing from my provider? Do I also cover the license for the infrastructure? How about the licensing for the clients and so on? Is this different? Is this completely different, or what's in, what's out?
So the question is, I repeat, is what do we have to do? Worry about licensing? Do we need licensing for the infrastructure? What do we do for the clients? I'll briefly answer that, and then I'll defer to, we have a business and licensing session in here. I'll find it for you in a second. Azure Stack is the same as Azure, that it comes with a pay-as-you-go business model, right? So you buy the hardware from your OEM. The software that runs the cloud comes for free. There's no licensing. And then you start paying for it when you start spinning up VMs. And that VM utilization shows up on your Azure bill, okay? The client stuff that gets deployed is predominantly bring your own license. So if you're deploying a Windows server into a VM on Azure Stack, you need to have a license for that particular VM that you manage in the context. But the infrastructure, there's no licensing. Does that make sense? I will defer. So there's a, which one is it? Support and business model?
3090 Azure Stack usage and billing.
Usage and billing. Azure Stack usage and billing, which is this one here. 30. There's another one, support. We can take it offline, and I can find you. I'll get you the contacts on that anywhere. Any other questions? Okay, thanks for your time.